You skipped his head, decapitation.
Oh my god, I skipped the head.
Yeah. Well, I'm taller.
This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
Hugo, I've heard that relationships based on intense circumstances never last.
Oh my God. We have to make it on sex then, I guess. Oh my God, I was not expecting you to do that. What the fuck? A grown man with action figures.
Well, get ready, Hugo. You'll see what I really have. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters. And as always, I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi, Hugo. How are you?
Ian, how are you doing? I can't believe you just did that. Tell me something, like what? I can see another doll behind you, so you have two of them then.
I think I've got 5. So, they're not all going to come out today.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so here we are, finally. After 63 episodes, we finally do the film that you always wanted to do on the episodes, didn't you? That's it.
Well,
it took us 63 episodes to get there.
Speed. Oh, by the way, everyone, we're talking about Speed today. Speed is a very, very important visual effects film in VFX history. It really is. So I'm glad we're talking about it. Yes, I'm obsessed with the film. And we're going to get into so much detail. It's crazy. But of course, before we get there, we want to make sure we thank our sponsors, Hugo, our YouTube subscribers, our Patreon supporters, and everyone who watches the show. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you.
Absolutely. We can't thank enough everyone that has supported the show from the very beginning. Both the sponsors, the Patreons, and you can always support the show as well and ask us questions if you want to by either supporting the Patreon of Hugo's Desk or the Patreon of Before and Afters. And it's been a big ride. By the time you are listening to this episode, all of you, we are just crossed our 30-year anniversary with the podcast, which is crazy. I can't believe we've been doing this for 3 years now.
I thought you said 30-year anniversary,
No,
but you mean
third.
3-year anniversary.
Sorry, third. I am so sorry. We'll get there, I'm assuming. We'll get to 30.
It is the 30th anniversary of Speed, of course. That's
yes,
one reason we're doing this episode.
Yeah.
But
which
yes, amazing.
coincides with the anniversary. I don't know how that worked, but just the day, like Speed anniversary is on the 10th of June, and the 11th of June is the VFX Notes Podcast episode anniversary. So it is not a coincidence, is it? It can't be a coincidence.
Oh no, it's definitely prearranged that's happened, Hugo. Speed rules my life, and now it therefore rules yours. So.
Before we go to Speed, I must say, I can't thank enough everyone that has been supporting the show from the very beginning. We've done 64 episodes so far. We've done 3 years of this. We've had we're almost to 1 million views on the entire show. And, man, it's amazing. I'll give you a few stats. So we're about to cross 800,000 views, 64 episodes, 6 guests so far. Biggest countries watching, we have India, US, UK, Canada, Japan, France, Germany, Brazil. By the way, no Portugal or Australia.
None at all?
No, they watch it, but it's not on the top 10. That's what I mean.
Oh, right.
So we have to have a conversation with our fellow countrymen about this. Age group as well, like we have like 30% watching from 18s to 24 years old, 45% or 25s to 35. And here's an important stat. 71% of people watching are not subscribed. Could you please just subscribe to Hugo's Desk?
Please click the button. Yeah.
We're really trying to reach 100,000 subscribers so we can get a shiny plaque and a certified little tick box on Hugo's Desk. So please consider subscribing to the channel to help us get there and to get to 100,000 subscribers. But no, we can't thank you enough. It's unbelievable that we did it for 3 years, and I can't believe that this has started so out of the blue. And we've been going for so long, but it's amazing, man. I'm really enjoying it.
I enjoy it too so much, Hugo, with you, especially when we do it live in the bunker. Yeah. We obviously also did it at FMX, and I really enjoy everyone's comments on the YouTube clips and just on social media as well. So keep them coming in. I hope you have plenty of comments about Speed once we release this episode. But let's get Hugo's comments first about what he thought of the film. Hugo, did you happen to see this in 1994?
No, I didn't. No, I am sorry to say that. Like, I didn't see it on the cinema. At the time, I was on high school, I guess. And, you know, when I was at high school, there was really no cinema nearby where I used to live. You know, I lived in a place in Portugal called Queluz, Massamá, which was like an area near Lisbon. There wasn't really any big cinema places. There was like an arty cinema around, which I used to go and see, you know, David Cronenberg and David Lynch films and things like that, weird films that they would, or European films that they would play there. But I didn't see Speed on the cinema, no. My first contact with Speed was on the club video, you know, like going to the video club and renting the VHS. Yeah. That was like renting the VHS and then, of course, renting the DVD. So unfortunately, it didn't grab me when it first came out. Of course, as a young man, you know, I think it was like, I was like, 16 or 17 when I first watched it on VHS or on DVD. I think it was first on VHS and then DVD a few years later. I was blown away by it, of course. You know, as a 16-year-old, this was like, oh my God, this is the best movie ever. In hindsight, it's not the best movie ever. But I guess we'll get to that. But so no, unfortunately I didn't get to see it on the cinema, but I'm assuming you did, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it when I was 16 at a local cinema in Wollongong in Australia where I grew up. And I think this film solidified an already large interest I had in filmmaking from the Back to the Future films, from Jurassic Park, from Star Wars stuff. But this film it blew me away as a 16-year-old. It stayed with me. I think I was in love with Sandra Bullock. I thought, how can this film be so exciting? They're just on a bus the whole time and it works. Yeah. And I don't think I understood for many years why it worked as an action film, as a drama film, as a visual effects related film as well, you know, until I started understanding more about the process. And like you, I got it on VHS and DVD and just because if people don't already know, I collect Speed memorabilia, which is something that kind of related to getting the poster once when I was about 18, I think, and then realizing there was all this other stuff for the film on eBay, and it, you know, sort of snowballed from there. But as a film, Hugo, I just was like, I've watched it easily 400 times, you know. Like, I'm not even joking about that, I think.
You're not kidding, okay.
Yeah.
I have films like that, I'll be honest. Yeah. I have films that I've done that as well. If you were 16 when you first watched it, then if I watched it on VHS, I must have been 17 or 18 because, you know, remember it used to be like 2 years until something would come out to the club to the video club. Sorry, I keep saying club video because in Portuguese it's the other way around. Sorry. So, and this is such a Portuguese memory because I've only experienced the video club in Portugal, never experienced outside Portugal because it kind of came and went quite quickly.
I don't know what it is. What is it?
where you go to rent movies, the video club. What's the name
like
on
a
this?
Blockbuster.
Yeah, sorry. Because
Right, okay.
because we didn't have Blockbuster in Portugal. We only had Blockbuster really late when it was already almost over, and so it was mom and pops. It was like really like family-owned video clubs.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Where you would go and rent movies. There wasn't any chains attached to renting movies. And so that's why I think the word Blockbuster isn't really a big thing in Portugal, because it only happened like years later. But I must have been 17 and 18 already, and I think that's probably why it didn't really... I guess it didn't grab me as much as, I can say that, for example, I was obsessed... A few years back, I was obsessed with Aliens 2, and I was obsessed with Predator, and I was obsessed with 2001, and there was a few films that I probably watched 400 times. I don't know what happened with Speed. Speed, I kind of liked it. Of course, I was blown away by the action and by the effects at the time, but I don't think I have the love that you have for the film, and I think it has to be not watching it on the cinema, because I am assuming if I would have watched it on the cinema, it would have been a big, big thing, because... watch it on a VHS, you're going to be watching like a 4:3 pan and scan version, which is like really shitty quality and really shitty sound. And on a little tiny TV, it just doesn't have the same impact. Imagining watching it on a big screen like that, because it is a film to watch on the big screen.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This film sucks on pan and scan VHS.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, of course.
And I remember it. It was at a time where you could only get the pan and scan version, and then they actually released a widescreen version of Speed and Speed 2 in 1998 or something on widescreen. And it was like, oh my God, I'd forgotten about that extra data, extra imagery.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so great, of course, on the big screen is that the director is Jan de Bont, who's the cinematographer, and the cinematographer, André Bartuvac, can't pronounce his name very well, I'm really sorry about that, is just a master. They're both masters at this kind of huge scope.
Anamorphic footage.
Anamorphic.
Like they're obsessed with anamorphic, and all the way going back to Die Hard, and of course it loses all of it. Like on pan and scan, are you kidding? It looks horrible.
It's terrible. I remember it being terrible. But
I've been buying a few VHS films lately just to check the pan and scan shenanigans, and some of them, man. I recently bought The Graduate, and I bought also Misery in VHS, and on some shots they actually don't do a pan and scan. They actually cut to half of the side, and then they cut to the other side. Yeah. So they actually are re-editing the film by cutting. Which is just oh my God! I can't even believe that's what's happening.
In this film, in Speed, it looks like there's some mistakes in the pan and scan, because like sometimes you sort of see a rifle barrel sticking into frame, but in the widescreen version there's a police officer there, and things like that, or they get to the gap in the freeway, and I think in the pan and scan they kind of scan across it like that. It's not what happens in the film, So yes, I remember it, and I'm so glad that we don't have that world anymore. Yeah, and that people have such great TVs at home, so they enjoy it how they're meant to see it. But this is a cinema film. Absolutely. And a film on film. Absolutely. That I've been lucky enough to see a couple of times.
I've of course I was lucky I got the 4K version, which I've watched on a projector, so at least I watched it as big as I could. I watched it on HDR with the projector. Very good scan, like really good scan. You see the grain, it's very good version. So I recommend, but I don't recommend either. Like this 4K version gives you a good experience of what the cinema would have been like, but unfortunately, the extras, they only left the commentaries. There's nothing else on this Blu-ray. So all the fancy... I have a DVD with 2 discs here, which has a lot of extras, which are the extras that you're referring to. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity. They've re-released it on 4K, but took away all the extras. It's just stupid. I just don't understand why they would have done that. This is a running conversation on our podcast, but I'm assuming you were saying about the experience of watching it at the time. You were blown away by the cinema. This DVD is amazing. I'm sure you were blown away by that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. The extras on DVDs from the 90s, especially bigger films, action films, and leading into some visual effects films of the late 90s and early 2000s, are my film school.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't
Absolutely.
study art or film or visual effects, but I guarantee you, in addition to reading Cinefex, watching some of these behind-the-scenes extras is how I seem to know a bit about visual effects. And the Speed extras are fantastic. They're really fly on the wall.
Very detailed. Super detailed.
Yeah, fly on the wall stuff. Yeah. And isn't it a shame, Hugo, that, you know, we're kind of in an era where, yes, there are plenty of featurettes on streaming series and big movies, but they're much, much more marketing-driven featurettes about the actors and stuff like that.
These extras for this DVD, they're really raw. Like, they're super raw. Like, there's just like clips badly filmed and just behind the scenes, almost like B-roll almost of footage of what happened. I'm assuming that's why it's not on the 4K Blu-ray, because it doesn't look that very good. And I'm assuming there's also all sorts of licensing problems, because some of the featurettes on the DVD, they have like the soundtrack of Aliens and the soundtrack of Predator, and they have like just random soundtracks from films of that time. And I'm assuming it was just like it was the Wild Wild West with licensing, and now it's probably very difficult for them to kind of put it in, and they probably don't even have the masters of it. I'm assuming there is a reason for the extras to be gone, but it's funny that you said it's your film school. I feel exactly like you. You know, we are the same age, so it's the same thing for me as well. I can tell you without a doubt, Ian, that without DVD extras, I wouldn't even be in this business. I feel like DVD extras cemented my love for cinema and cemented my love for visual effects. You know, in the first DVDs I bought in my life, you know, like the Seven special edition of Seven, the special edition of Fight Club, the special edition of Any Given Sunday, you know, the special edition of Mission to Mars. These kind of DVDs were, which not terrific movies, but like there were so many extras and so much meat in these DVDs, and then the audio commentaries as well, and of course then Twisters DVDs, which is really good as well, Perfect Storm DVD, like all these DVDs, especially the audio commentaries. I've learned so much from this. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of information that you get from it. Like it's, you said it so well. This is film school, absolutely like film school. If you watch them all, you know, and then of course, don't even get me started with the Lord of the Rings special editions, which are, you know, like 5 hours of extras. It's just like, it's an experience that people, I know we sound like old men, but like, it's an experience that it's gone. It's unfortunately, it's completely gone.
And clearly it's related to the income generation of films and also DVDs, and maybe the appetite of audiences who can quickly watch a marketing featurette on YouTube. Yeah, you know, and yeah, like it's a real shame. Occasionally on, say, Disney Plus, they'll have like an hour-long fly on the wall thing for a Marvel series. But even then, it does fall into a marketing thing sometimes, and that's a shame. The combination of Speed's great making of featurettes and two really, really different audio commentaries. I don't know if you've been able to listen to both of them.
To both of them.
One is Jan de Bont. The other is Mark Gordon and the writer, Graham Yost, talking about Speed in the most candid, frank way you would not expect from an official DVD commentary. And then, even then, it turns out, I think they're still not revealing that much about the film. No. And the reason we know that is because this year, Hugo, because of the 30th anniversary of Speed, a journalist who used to work for Variety, Chris Tapley, who may well be more obsessed with Speed than I am. I think it's possible. He has an audio podcast called 50 Miles Per Hour, which had 50 episodes. I mean, it's just about finished, and it'll be finished on the anniversary of Speed.
Yeah.
That have been brilliant and have brought to life all these other news stories about Speed that I didn't even know. So anyway, the commentary tracks are incredible, but then coupled with the making of docos, really made that original DVD release of Speed so cool.
It did. And I really advise everyone to get it. I bought this from CX, which is like a used shop here in the UK. I'm sure there is an alternative CX all over the world, or you can buy it on eBay. It cost me £1.50. So I can tell you that £1.50 is worth for just the audio commentaries. Think of the audio commentaries like 2 great podcast episodes that you're going to listen to. You know,
Exactly.
like it is definitely worth it. And even if you don't have a DVD player, you know, because I know a lot of people don't have one, you can always maybe get like a DVD reader and then at least play them on your computer, because computers still have a DVD player. I can tell you that, because the Mac even today, MacOs still has a DVD player software on it. So if you put a disc, it will play the DVD.
Now we really sound like old men.
I know. But the funny thing is that DVD player app from the macOS is hidden now. It's inside utilities. So I think Apple is actually ashamed of it or something. They still have it on the system, but it's hidden now. And you have to find it on the terminal. But the funny thing about it is that audio commentary that you're talking about with the producer and the writer, I think it's faster than the film. Jesus Christ, they don't shut up. They are on steroids. They are talking, and there's so many threads of things that they're about to say that they actually don't say. It is really good, isn't it? It's such a good commentary.
I know.
I was laughing my ass out listening to it. There's so many times where he's about to say something, and then the other guy just said, I don't think you should say that. And said, oh yeah, I won't say it then. It's just so strange. It is so bizarre. It is so bizarre. But
yes, because listen, if you listen to the Chris Tapley's podcast, you find out, unfortunately, that people didn't always get along with Jan de Bont, and there were other sorts of crazy things. Like, of course, Graham Yost wrote the script, but it's famously rewritten by Joss Whedon, who is probably rewrote most of the dialogue, and didn't get a writer credit. So that's sort of controversial. I don't think they bring that up on the commentary.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
The film is full of crazy factoids.
I have also to say, we've talked about, we promoted the DVD, we promoted the 4K. Of course, Cinefx has a little small article about it, but the best place for you to learn all about Speed is this magazine. You must have heard about it. I don't know. Yes.
I seem to have a copy here as well. Oh.
I'm not kidding, and I'm really not joking. And I know Ian is here, and he hasn't paid me to say this. Man, this is amazing. I can't believe how good this is. Like this is the best issue that you've done so far of the before and afters. And I know it's the first one. Well, technically it's the first one, right? It is the first issue, technically.
It was kind of like a side issue just on Speed.
So it's not the first one, I guess, but it's quite early on. I think it's quite early on, because it's not even from Amazon. It's from a publisher. So this is anyone that loves Speed needs to go and buy this right now. It is so good. Ian gathered some amazing interviews, some tidbits, some little pieces of stories, including little parts of writing that you've done as well, especially the last chapter that you wrote here about your experience of foreseeing it and what the effects were kind of. This is so good. Congratulations, my friend. This is so good. And I think it's by far the best written account of Speed that I've read so far. It's better than the Cinefx article, much better. So it's really good. People should go and buy it,
Oh, that's very good of you. Thank you to the people who are featured in that magazine, mostly overall production supervisor Boyd Shermus and special effects supervisor John Frazier, who we'll talk about a lot in this episode, and Ron Brinkmann, who was from Sony Pictures Imageworks. Now, people should know Ron from the Shake days.
And his amazing book of digital compositing, of course. He's a legend in the industry. The cool thing about your book, about your magazine, is that I'm calling it a book because it is kind of like a book. Like I couldn't stop reading it. I started reading it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh, I'm going to just read the first article. I'm going to and then I'll slowly go through it. I did the whole thing back to back. Like I couldn't stop because it was so good. It's some great stories, and you know me, and I don't really know a lot about speed. Now I know. Now I'm an expert about it. But I felt like it was really engaging and really well written. So well done with that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Well, as I say, I think it's a really important visual effects film. It actually is a film that got into the Bake Off that year. And a tough year, with other films like Forrest Gump
crazy year.
True Lies and The Mask. But kind of exciting that Speed was at the Bake Off, and possibly surprising to people who didn't realize how much of a combination of miniatures, practical effects, and digital visual effects was in there. Just remember, everyone, this is 1994, only a year after Jurassic Park. When, people was definitely stunned by ILM's CG dinosaurs. But in 1994, miniatures were still huge. Optical compositing was still a thing being done. And makeup effects and special effects and practical effects were just still a big, big part of how these films got made. So Speed did all of that, basically.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those incredible films where you're just at the cusp of starting CG, but still with the old school. And so the amazing thing about it is that you get this great combination of all the worlds. So you have some amazing, we'll talk about it in detail, but we have some amazing miniatures, but then together with some little bits and pieces of visual effects and some CG, and then some matte paintings, and then some high-speed photography and some motion control. So it's like this lovely time in the world of cinema, which we haven't gone back. It's just at the cusp, and it's amazing that all of these came together to do these visual effects. And because of course Juan de Bont then later on embraced CG completely with Twister, and you guys should go and check out our episodes. We have 2 episodes about Twister, where it's a lot more CG involved on that film. But this film is really special. I think it's really special because it's groundbreaking. These things are like, these people are working on these visual effects and working on these special effects in miniatures, and they're just making shit up as they go along, like, because there's no pipeline. It is so funny to see Ron Brinkmann talking about it on the DVD. He's actually featured on the DVD, by the way. Ron talking in front of a computer, which is very rare these days. He's in front of a Silicon Graphic. No, I don't think it's a Silicon Graphic, but it's like a big ass CRT, and he's like playing back the footage with a matte painting, and he's like talking about how hard it is to go and render it on the farm, and it takes like 3 hours a frame and this and that. And it's just like so quaint and so funny to actually see this people like doing these things without, there's no pipeline, there's no written account of how it should be done. These people are coming up with techniques, coming up with ways of comping things, because we don't have Nuke. That doesn't exist.
That's a really interesting thing to talk about, actually. As we say, there were definitely pioneering things being done in CG and digital compositing.
Yeah.
But we were still needing to input-output film.
Yeah.
So we were still needing to scan in film frames and then output to film frames.
Yeah.
We were still needing to worry a lot about color management. We still do, but color management on film was really tricky.
Yeah.
And also just deal with film and watch dailies on film.
Yeah.
These computers weren't powerful enough sometimes to watch sequences in high resolution, right?
No.
And review shots.
No.
So you had to film them out. Hugo, let me tell you a quick anecdote about Ron Brinkmann and Speed. This is maybe how the conversation is going to go today. We're just going to go everywhere. I once did a podcast episode review of the film when I was at FX Guide, and Ron was on that episode, which was fun.
Awesome.
And then during the episode, he said, "Ian, I didn't know you were so obsessed with Speed. I would have given you all my ImageWorks stuff, which I just threw out yesterday.
No.
And what he told me was there were all these wedge tests and film pieces. Okay, that's about 2010. We did that. Okay, cut to 2 months ago, Hugo. Ron finds them in his basement.
Oh, man.
And he just sent me them. Literally a couple of days ago.
Oh my
and
God.
It is the Motherload. I happen to have one example here, which is hard for you to see, I know.
Oh my God.
But basically, these are ImageWorks film outs and wedge tests of particular shots. This one here is actually the crane falling down the elevator shaft. So let's remember it's a CG crane.
Yeah.
Or it's actually this one on this side. And it's just a box full of these things, and I just cannot believe he sent me these. I just am so grateful for Ron for doing that.
That is so cool. Like
Incredible.
You must be so happy now.
I love it. And I think he just thought that he chucked them, but he obviously put them in another box in his garage and didn't throw them away, which is super cool. I feel like I've got some great VFX history there.
Yeah.
There's whole rolls of 35mm film. I don't have any way to look at them or play them, but I think they'll have to work that out someday.
What you mean, like
you
mean like actual 45, not just like you showed there, like an actual roll that you have to put on a projector.
Yeah, things like this.
Oh shit!
So this is.
We can get that scanned
God.
if you want.
I know you can. Yeah. This is. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh.
Be careful.
Anyway.
Be careful.
Yeah. I don't know what all of them are, and I don't think Ron does either. Which is
we can scan
a fun
them.
bit
Like
of it.
what we could do if you want to, we could we shouldn't buy one because it's too expensive. But we can rent like a 35 scanner. Blackmagic has one, so we can rent one for like a few days and just scan the whole thing.
Okay.
It plugs into a Thunderbolt cable. You can just run it on a laptop.
Amazing.
So
and everybody listening and watching, you just heard Hugo's going to pay for the whole thing. He just admitted that, right?
Yes,
in front of everybody.
I don't mind doing that. I would love to see what's in there. I would love to see that. It's like forensics of Speed. Jesus, that's insane.
But it isn't, so the film thing is important, and Ron was there, and I guess it informed a lot of what ImageWorks did with their own in-house compositing tools, and then what basically got invented with Shake.
Yeah.
But there are other things that were groundbreaking on this film as well that we'll talk about, which are things like tracking.
Yeah.
Tracking didn't exist in any compositing tool at the time, and so that very much was invented, as part of different workflows here from ImageWorks and another company called Video Image, which became VFX.
Yeah.
Then there's some amazing special effects inventions that are part of this film as well, Hugo. One of them is something that the special effects supervisor John Frazier invented called the blind driver roof pod.
Yeah.
Now, everyone sees these pod cars now being used for filming high-octane driving scenes. Say Gran Turismo, where the stunt driver is actually in a pod above a car, and you can then film the actor in the car pretending to drive. Well, Speed is where that was invented, for a person driving a bus, making it look like Sandra Bullock's driving a bus, but it's actually a stunt driver on top of the bus or in different positions in the bus.
Yeah.
And rigging up certain things to do it. So, and by the way, the team that made that happen just got a SciTech for it. So it's really fun that Speed's still being recognized like this 30 years later, and that team is. But it's funny when you go and research the film and look back at what they did, how influential it is in the world of special and visual effects. Yeah. I think that's a big deal.
Absolutely. That pod car thing, they invented that, and they also created this rigging harness system so that the driver wouldn't hurt himself when the bus jumped as well, and all these techniques that you mentioned already with Ron and with matte painting and tracking and compositing as well. It's a groundbreaking film, absolutely groundbreaking, and shout out also like the methodology of filming this, because I think people find it easy and quaint to think about, oh yeah, well, they had 7 cameras to shoot the bus jumping. Oh, that's fine, because you can just like get a bunch of Blackmagic cameras, put them everywhere. These are film cameras, okay? These are magazine 35 Vista cameras. Like, they're not like just like a toy or like a GoPro or a digital camera. Digital cameras are not a thing yet. We're still a few years out, not very much out, but a few years out from having the groundbreaking Sony camera with George Lucas and with Michael Mann, and when they started using the F900, like, we're still years away from that. And so some of these shots have 7, 8, 9 cameras rigged, and the amount of footage being passed through these things, some cameras at 240 frames per second, some cameras at 64 frames per second, some cameras at 48 frames per second. This is an enormous amount of data and footage that they had to process, that they had to scan. It's unbelievable. And also there's other groundbreaking things going around as well. Like, I don't know if it's the first time, but they've actually ventured in rendering 4K on this film, which is insane. Like, they ended up rendering the title sequence in 4K, right. Which is like unheard of. You imagine trying to render 4K in 94. It's just like, this is 30 years ago. Like, 2K was already hard. 2,000 pixels or even HD was already a pain in the ass to do it at that time. But they couldn't even play it back. They couldn't even watch it. They, like you said, they had to print it to scan. They had to print it to film to even watch it. Like, it's just the speed of this, like the amount of effort going around on this. Like, it's just insane. I hats off to the entire team, because this is just amazing.
And as I say, make sure you listen to Chris Tapley's 50 miles per hour podcast. Yeah. There's lots of these achievements are in there, including sound. Now, we don't normally talk about that much on this podcast, but this is also a big change in how digital tracks and digital editing of sound took place. And, they won a couple of Oscars for sound, this film. So, so much was transitioning in the industry at the time.
Both Speed and Twister were groundbreaking films for Dolby Surround, DTS mastering and digital mastering. But it's funny that it's the same director. I'm assuming that he's very keen into sound, because both these two films were pivotal. And also they've made the advancements on DVD as well, and also for Dolby Surround systems at home as well, which really revolutionized the way that we watch films at our homes, so.
Yeah, and just to sort of continue that theme of the groundbreakingness, but then tie it into what people still loved about action films.
Yeah.
So I know that, Hugo, we talk about all the time that no CGI stuff and the growth of CGI. But there is this period in the 90s where many films were taking advantage of CG imagery, and you could definitely argue that occasionally a CG creature didn't look that good, or a digital comp didn't look so good, for the same reason that an optical comp didn't look that good in some 80s films, One of the things that probably worked so well with Speed is that Jan de Bont had a determination to film this, and in particular the bus journey, in situ, with the passengers on the bus, the cameras attached to the bus, inside the bus. He even used the handrails as like a dolly mover for the camera sometimes. But my point being, he didn't shoot it on blue screen and add process plates for the backgrounds.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was under consideration. It
was. There was two things. It was the blue screen, and also like the the track, but not the tracking, when people are running the track treadmills. They were also considering treadmills as well, which was insane.
Yeah, a bus on a treadmill.
But they did consider it. I have a funny story about that. You probably know this story, but you know that were actually discussing the treadmills, and then it all ended. I don't know where I read this, but it all ended when John de Bont asked the special effects supervisor, okay, so how dangerous is it if we fall down the treadmill compared to how dangerous it is if we fall down from the real street? And the supervisor just said, oh, it's the same. Okay, then we're shooting it for real. so much for being on an enclosed environment with treadmill. It was as dangerous as being outside. It was so dangerous.
That's right. I now remember I talked to John Fraser about that.
Maybe it was on.
And they actually did
maybe
make
it was,
one.
Maybe you wrote this.
Yeah,
I think it's in your magazine.
One.
I think it's in a magazine.
They actually made one as a test to see how it would go. And yes, basically, for what the reason you just said, they did not do that. But yeah. So I'm just saying that old school, but it was what you had to do in the 90s.
Yeah.
Way of filmmaking is actually something people fondly remember about this film. So I think the visual effects work is incredible, but what people remember is that they did jump a bus over a ramp.
Which they actually did. I mean, they
not
did,
a gap.
Well, they
but
jumped a street. Yeah, they went.
That's right.
I mean, it went all the way to 100 feet in the air and 20 feet in the air and 100 feet across. So it's it was impressive,
Yeah, but so they did things for real because you had to, and then when they couldn't do things for real, they used still what we think of as practical special effects, which is miniatures, and then they used what were nascent digital compositing techniques to bring it all together. I mean, to me, it's almost a perfect visual effects film.
Yeah,
in that way.
I know what you mean.
And I think the audiences respond to that still today, especially in the age of, can we not just do everything on a blue screen or even a virtual production stage?
Exactly.
So.
Well, I think it has to do also with the fact that, I'll be honest, you know a lot more about speed than I did. Now I know more because I read your magazine and I watched all the extras and all the commentaries, but I didn't really knew much. And I'll be really honest, Ian, I did not know there was so much visual effects. I mean, digital visual effects. Yeah. I had no idea that there were so many shots. Well, it's not 100. It's only a couple of dozen shots or something, but I didn't know there was so many at the time with digital compositing. And I'll be honest, watching the 4K Blu-ray, which is in HDR in actual 4K, they've rescanned the whole thing. It looks incredibly perfect. The composites, both of, Keanu on the roof of the elevator with the blue screen behind him, that's one comp. And then also the comp, of course, of the bus jumping, which are there are 5 shots there. You have the gap on the freeway, which is a shot on the back, which the helicopter shot, which they had to track. You also, of course, have the several shots of the jump itself. And then, of course, several other composites that happen at the end as well of the film with the trains and the miniatures, combining miniature plates together. These are seamless. And I watched them, really watched them and went back and watched them and repeat them and kind of loop them a bit. They are flawless. These are really well-made composites. They're super well-made. I don't know what they were using at the time. Oh my God, this is better compositing, digital compositing than some films I see today. This is really stellar work. It's really really polished work. And I guess, of course, obviously they probably had more time than we probably now have. And they probably went deeper into the shots because they had so few of shots and they had a lot more budget as well involved as well on this. There is this figure thrown around on a lot of articles about the fact that these CG shots cost $175,000, the bus jumping, just the CG shots alone. I'm not sure if it's real, if it's not real, but there's a lot of sources that say those numbers. So I think in a way, probably just like with Jurassic Park, which Jurassic Park also has only a few shots, I think people forget how much time and effort and polish would go to these shots. The polish would be so extreme that they would look as good as the shots that we have now today. You know,
I know what you mean about polish. I think it's more as well economical.
Yeah.
So you're right. Jurassic is, the numbers are sometimes like 68 or 73 visual effects shots.
Yeah.
And the fact is, you're not being pummeled with lots of imagery in that way. I don't mean pummeled by CGI. I just mean pummeled by lots and lots of shots. I don't know the exact tools that ImageWorks or VFX were using at the time. Wavefront Composer was one of the compositing tools.
Alias would have been the one to do the 3D with Renderman as an at least for the winch or the elevator. That is Renderman and that is Alias. I'm assuming it's Alias for other parts of the film as well, but because that was the standard at the time.
And you could always argue that some of these comps are simpler than what we're faced with today.
Yeah.
And
they were really smart about it. Like, let me put my compositing hat here for a minute. They were really smart because they filmed on VistaVision these plates, these enormous plates. You know, I don't know how many preferred in size it is, but this is the equivalent of a 65 mil. And they were super smart about it because the film was an anamorphic, and anamorphic is a pain. It's still a pain today, let alone the pain now at the time. But they were really smart because they did not shoot the VFX shots, the CG and compositing digital shots with anamorphic. They shot them on VistaVision with circular lenses, which means they didn't have to deal with all the distortions and barrel distortions and chromatic aberrations that you usually get from anamorphic. And then they cropped in to fake the anamorphic aspect ratio from the VistaVision shot, and that also allowed them to crop and pan and scan and track and move shots. So especially on the bus shot, when the bus goes up and down, like they actually can go up on the frame and then go down on the frame in a 2D fashion. This is incredibly smart because you have so much leverage, so much resolution around the frame that you can actually frame exactly what you need, and then you can paint the rest, and using digital matte painting to do the rest. And so these choices were not only the polish is there, but also there are incredibly intelligent choices of getting away from the anamorphic, getting the VistaVision frame going in, and really using the best tools they could find at the time to kind of deal with these issues, and really tailoring the shots to what they had at end, you know. So one of the problems that we discuss so often on the podcast is that when CG doesn't look good or people complain about the CG, it's often when the design of the shot is not correct or when the direction of the shot is not correct. These shots are incredibly grounded and they're incredibly well designed. And because they're so well designed and they already come from a real shot anyway, I think that's why they work so well, because there's no crazy cameras, there's no crazy things, you know.
None of them are pure CG, like fully CG. They had to match pieces of film around them and actually as plates. Yeah. I'm not saying it happens now just because you shoot digitally, but because film has the grain and film is uneven sometimes and isn't as perfect as a digital image, you get away with a little bit, right? And also in compositing, you have to match it. But I just think Speed is an example of where they could take advantage, as you've mentioned, of using the format to get away with the things that they need to get away with in early visual effects work from the 90s. And they do.
Yeah, and I think that's why people responded so much like you when you were young, when you were 15 and 16, when you watched the film the first time. Because I think this is one of the first times where, you know, because if you look back at Predator or you look back at Aliens or you look back at Die Hard, you still see the black edges around things. You still see the poorly composite things. I think this is one of the first films where you don't see anything. There's no edges. There's no black edges. There's nothing. Like you don't have any of the artifacts that you normally have with optical compositing, with the mattes and everything, because in digital compositing they can actually clean it up a little bit better. And so that's why the illusion still lasts to this day, because this is the first time we saw that jump and we like, what did I just saw? Like, what is this? Like, did they actually shot this? Like, you kind of, when you were young, you probably kind of thought that, like when you saw it the first time,
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think the one final thing, maybe we should get into some of these sequences,
Yeah, of course.
but one final thing I'll say.
Deviate the conversation. I am sorry.
Yeah. No, not at all. One thing I'll say is that it really is obvious in today's filmmaking that when a filmmaker uses multiple techniques, I always tend to have a better experience.
Yeah.
And I mean multiple effects techniques. An example in Speed is absolutely CG, miniatures, great digital compositing, rear projection.
Yeah.
Like that's how they do Dennis Hopper's head falling off,
Yeah.
On that sequence. Big spoiler there.
Well, you had 30 years.
And if people only watch the miniature crash in the construction area at the end, they look like miniatures.
Yeah.
But surrounding the scene with shots of inside the train of Keanu and Sandra, and then what they could shoot in the underground at LA, it just builds it up. The experience that I had that on recently, where they use multiple techniques, was actually one of the Jurassic World films, where they did use a lot of practical dinos. They used ILMs and other vendors' great CG imagery. They used forced perspective miniatures.
Yeah.
They just tossed it up a little bit and used a bunch of different techniques. And it, for me, had the same feeling as like, oh, I know that that's a practical dinosaur, but it just works in this shot.
Yeah.
And so that's basically how I sort of feel about Speed. I can look away from what might be a slightly... It's not a bad comp or anything like that at all. It's just a comp from 1993, 94, because there's other things going on around that frame.
But having said that, like the miniature work, which is 1:8, by the way, in terms of size of it, like so that people know, it's quite big, actually, if you think about it. But it's not. If you look, for example, at Superman, from the 70s, that's where you really see that it's a miniature. When you look at Superman, especially when you see the dam and the water going through, you can clearly see it's a miniature because of the depth of field. Yeah. That's really the issue here. I think tapping into the John de Bont's experience as a cinematographer, which is mind-blowing. He's like one of the best cinematographers in the world, like ever. And he basically created a childhood, like he's basically the responsible cinematographer of all the action movies we love. And so he's a legend in the industry, and he really knows his craft in cinematography. Then together, of course, with the cinematographer of this film as well, which is also a legend on this industry, they really tapped into almost perfection. Like that miniature shot... On some shots, they really nailed the depth of field. Like some, there's a few off,
completely.
But the depth of field, which is extreme, like they're shooting f11s on these cameras. They're shooting with so much light that it's even, like they say on the first minute, they even melt parts of the miniature. Which you actually mentioned this on your magazine, and they also mentioned it on the audio commentary, I believe, with John de Bont. So. The experience of having really powerful lights and high-speed photography by calculating the 1/8 scale to calculate the frame rate necessary to try to come up with a 24 frames per second sequence and then a 48 frames per second coming out of 68 or out of 240. This is really smart. This is like really intelligent methodology to try to get the miniatures to look really, really big. And
and they match.
Yeah,
that's what you're really saying.
Exactly.
They match with the live action.
They do because it's all calculated. It's all mathematically calculated so that the size matches, and then they shoot with a certain speed on the camera that is matching the 1/8 scale. And that's why on some shots it looks perfect. Some, like, there's a few that are, you can kind of see an edge here, or you can see there's a bit more depth of field than it should be, but it's almost perfect. And I think it's just an outstanding sequence. Like, I mean,
I guess I'm talking about that. The really example that still sticks is Jurassic Park, where you know that that's a rubber silicon dinosaur by Stan Winston, and you know that that's an ILM one. Yeah. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It really, there's something about the way that picture film is put together that means it doesn't matter. And speed, to me, feels the same, especially in that miniature sequence, which we will really get into in a bit more detail. But Hugo, I want to start with obviously the crazy opening title sequence of this film, which is a down, following the elevator down an elevator shaft as the titles get wiped on to, each bar in the elevator shaft, each girder, basically. I think almost that's my big memory of Speed, is like, this is a cool opening title sequence. And one of the coolest things about watching those behind the scenes docos is to see the miniature on its side, on its, so it's not shot up and down because they didn't really have enough room to put the miniature there. It's a Grant McCune design miniature. Now, Grant McCune was someone who came from the Star Wars days and did so many cool things. But basically, it's a 46-story miniature. I think it's 85 feet long and has 400 miniature fluorescent tubes in it, which they had to shoot motion control.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just for a title sequence.
I know.
It's incredible, right? Incredible.
It looks incredible. And it was really painful as well to shoot. Incredibly painful to shoot this because, it's motion control. As soon as something goes off, they have to start a run again. And because they had to stitch all the separate passes with the shafts all together. And so, and they had all sorts of problems, like the film magazines would lock up, so they had to start again. The panels would melt, they would have to start again. Maybe there was a bump on the camera, they would have to start again. It was just like a week of 20 hours a day mayhem to try to do this, which is funny because they don't really mention that on the documentaries on the DVD. Of course, they don't really mention how painful it was. You kind of find out that when I read your magazine, on when you start seeing the stuff that is not coming out now, that people see how difficult this thing was. But it was definitely worth it. Like I was blown away by this sequence when I first saw it, and I'm still blown away by how cool it is. And obviously these days it's quite old-fashioned to have a title sequence. You don't see it anymore on films, unfortunately. I like title sequences. I really always liked title sequences. But and there's also stories about John de Bont using pre-visualization to do this thing as well, which is insane.
And in fact, there must be a really interesting story to tell about the Sony Pictures Imageworks starting up as an outfit of Sony, because what they were doing was they had, visual effects artists doing visual effects work and supervision, but they also were doing PreViz with a very, with, I guess, must have been the equivalent of Video Toaster and early 3D video systems.
Well, I read that it was, I don't know where now anymore, but I read that it was 3D Studio, like not 3D Studio Max, but 3D Studio, the first one, before it became Max. And before it was Autodesk. So it was just 3D Studio, which he had on his laptop, which is like, I would assume it's like a really, really gigantic brick laptop that he had carrying around probably. But
isn't the cool thing that Jan de Bont like grabbed a mouse and could actually maneuver around in that PreViz? And then, this is really great. It drove the design considerations for that lettering and also the camera moves. And of course, that miniature was used for other shots of the elevator being shown during the opening sequence. But yes, again, as we say, these things at the time were just used to make the film, but actually turned out to be quite groundbreaking.
Yeah, and it became parts of the pipeline of how we do films today. I mean, John de Bont kind of like, I guess he did films a bit early. He should have been doing films 20 years later, because he's kind of like, he's in the middle of all this beginning, PreViz and CG, but it's not really there yet. It's almost like it's not really there yet. And this sequence is really groundbreaking. And then, of course, like I mentioned, they've rendered the title sequences in 4K, which is really insane how how problematic that must have been to actually render the titles in 4K. So that they could kind of like, and the funny stories about this is that there was only one artist that actually could do this, and then she went in vacation for a few days and she wasn't there, and then they had to wait. It was just like all sorts of, because people need to understand at this time, during this groundbreaking time, there was not a lot of people on planet Earth that could actually do these things. Like it was literally science fiction almost. Like these people were doing like basically advanced mathematical engineering on computer to doing visual effects. And I don't mean like, I don't want anyone to, what I'm about to say, I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that it's better at that time than it is now. I'm not saying that at all. And in fact, if you go to any visual effects company these days, you have people with PhDs, you have doctors, you have like people that are absolute mind-blowing in mathematical equations and algorithms, and there are programmers on these companies. This is a really advanced industry right now. But I think one of the reasons why we love these films so much and why we are so attracted to them, even if the VFX don't look that good sometimes, and we still think that it looks better than the ones that, especially with all this conversation that people think that it looks better before and now it doesn't look as good. I think it has to do with this handcrafting that existed at the time. We're talking about very few shots. We're talking about very few people in this industry that actually could do this. It's small crews. It's legendary people. These are Ron Brinkmann is a legend. Like you're like, we're talking about the person that practically invented pipeline of compositing. If you look at his book, his main book of digital compositing became the Bible of compositing for the last 20 years. And so I think that's why we're so attracted to it, because these people invented these things. These things were made up while they were doing the job. There is an artistry involved to it. There's names involved to it. It's not, these films have names connected to them. You know which artist worked on it. These people became really famous. They became Oscar winners. They became parts of ILM, parts of, we still know them to this. You can just go to any festival and they are there presenting and doing keynotes and panels and talking about the history. And I think that's why we're so blown away by it, and why there's this nostalgia that it looks so much better back then. It's not that it looked so much better. I actually think it's because of this artistry that was going around on these companies. Just like this artist, I don't remember her name, but this artist that she was the only one that could do these title sequences.
Yeah,
which was
I've
insane.
talked to people over the years about that, where when the crews were smaller, and when you owned a shot more, you were often the modeler, lighter, compositor of the shot, and even a TD almost owned a shot in a bigger way as well. So that's clearly what was happening at ImageWorks and VFX with some of these sequences. Yeah, and as you say, there was handcraftedness. It's funny, that's probably one of the things, a word we should use more in terms of CG and digital compositing.
Yeah.
Because we don't use it.
No.
Because we probably have equated it with model making and practical building and fabrication and sculpting. But it is handcraftedness.
Absolutely, it is.
If you're using a mouse.
Absolutely, it is. Like these people
I
are
know
artists.
that.
No, I know,
I know that. But
not,
yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That has to do... No, that has to do with, we just had a session at FMX where, Jonas had this wonderful session about his no CGI series, and you remember what I said at the end, when I kind of addressed the audience and talked about the fact that I think the visual effects industry needs to create a new language to talk with people, because I do believe that there is like a disconnect between the audience and the way we communicate and the way we talk about, nuke compositing or Z brush artist or Houdini artist, like the people in general don't know what these things are, and I feel like the reason why people really navigate to practical is because they know exactly what a modeler, a plasterer, or a painter, or a stuntman is. They know what these people are, and no one has no clue what a ZBrush artist is. I have nothing against ZBrush. I know I keep saying them as an example, but I have no example. The reason the reason I mentioned ZBrush artists, and I mentioned it on my article as well and on my video, is because ZBrush is the closest thing I feel like as an actual sculpture, because when you're using ZBrush, you're actually sculpting this clay piece. You know, you have this big blob, and you start sculpting with your pen, Wacom tablet, or either use a Wacom tablet or you use like one of these 3 Connect mouse, or you can kind of like sculpt and rotate and sculpt and rotate and sculpt. And you can even now do this with the Apple Pencil as well, because ZBrush is now launched for iPad as well. And I think there is an enormous artistry involved on this. Like these people are art. Like I've seen ZBrush artists making sculptures that are so advanced and so delicate and so outstanding that they should be exhibit. You know, like this. Of course, they can't be exhibited because they are just a virtual or a digital asset, but definitely should be 3D printed and put somewhere for people to admire. And I think that has to do with the fact that maybe we should reach out to the public in a better way, have a just like you said, the handcraftsmanship of it should be more mentioned. We should talk more with terms of art according to these things, and maybe even showcase the work in a different way so that our family understand better and other people understand it better, because that is why these films are beloved, because people kind of understood a bit better what was going on when they saw these behind the scenes, you know. Just the fact that you have Ron Brinkmann on front of the computer on the documentary, it just makes a different... Even someone outside the industry is watching this documentary, this Blu-ray, and they see a person in front of a computer and he's playing back these plates and he's explaining what he's doing, and you attach to this person what he's done, and you have a face to it, and you're like, oh, that's what they did. And I think even people outside the industry would understand this better than having a faceless company with 300 people, which you have no idea what happened. You know, I think as an industry, we have a lot to learn to be better. And I think that's where we start to solve this no CGI nonsense that is happening. You know, yeah.
The other thing about that elevator sequence, which we talked a little bit about already, was the winch. And I always loved this bit of the film, partly because we saw the winch for real on the top of the building, right? We see it crash through the air conditioning vent thing. I mean, I think even that is a spectacular effect, practical effect. And then we see it drag down and, you know, going down the elevator shaft, which is a miniature elevator shaft with a digital CG winch built and then composited by Imageworks. It's a pretty simple visual effects shot, but really effective and scary. Like, oh, wow, imagine if they'd been hit by this, or imagine if they'd been in the elevator car and the winch hadn't held them up. Like, so I'm enjoying the film just for the story elements, but then later on realizing that they did some pretty great stuff, you know, even with CG back in 1994 for that, Hugo. Yeah,
absolutely. And also, like, it's funny that you mentioned that. Of course, at the time, I didn't really notice that it was CG at all, because it's so well made and it's motion blurred and it's going, again, shot design. It's really well designed. And that's why this is the perfect combination, like the perfect choice to make that effect. So it doesn't, like, people don't understand that it's an effect because it's so quick and so many things are happening. And you see, the smart thing is that you see the winch so many times, the real one. You know, you see it so many times before, and you see it going a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it like keeps going like step by step until the elevator is almost dropping. And then you just see the CG one. You don't even think about it anymore. And yeah, incredibly well made with RenderMan and Alias. And you don't even, I mean, if you pause and if you go frame by frame, you can kind of see that the shaders are a little bit rough, and the shaders are not as good as the shaders would have been today. But I think did an incredible job on those shots, and I can't even comprehend how difficult it must have been to be doing them now at that time. It's not.
Well,
it's
it
30
also-
years. People forget it's 30 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
it's a long time.
It has some great weight to it,
Yeah.
and it hits the edges of the miniature effectively, the elevator shaft. Yeah, I just think that's a simple visual effects sequence, but a really, really great one. So yeah. Hugo, the next big effect sequence in the film is that bus.
Yeah.
The first explosion that happens. I particularly love that sequence for a quick reason I'll tell you, which is if you go to Los Angeles, this area is Venice Beach, and there's a really great cafe there. That's the one where Keanu forgets his muffin, and buys something, then walks out to his car, and the camera follows around and then shows the bus exploding.
Oh, you mean the car you have right there on the back there? You mean that shape there?
Yeah, that's right. But right nearby is where a bunch of visual effects studios used to be, including
really?
Digital Domain.
Oh, wow.
Which didn't work on this film, but Digital Domain was right there. So I used to visit them quite a lot in LA and then go and look at this speed shooting location,
God.
which is always fun.
What
and
a
one
geek.
time,
You go there
I
and
know,
take some photos.
get ready for more of these stories. One time I was talking to Doug Roble, who used to be, I think, the CTO of Digital Domain, and he was telling me that in 1994-3, they stood on their roof and watched this bus explosion take place.
That is insane.
Which is so cool.
That
Anyway,
is insane. That is insane. No,
but it's a fun sequence.
Yeah,
isn't it?
this explosion is. So I have two things that I want to talk about on this sequence. So funnily enough, the explosion is massive. Jesus Christ, it's massive, and
It's a bit big.
Yeah, it's a typical 90s explosion with a lot of gasoline, make it as black as possible. But you can clearly see the car towing the bus on the front.
You can.
It is so funny. You see it on 3 shots where you literally see a car and you literally see the wire towing the bus.
But I don't remember seeing them when I was 16.
Of course not.
So
Of course not.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't need to do anything about it.
You're not looking
and you
at
can
it.
trick the viewer
You're not looking at
without worrying about it.
The second thing I want to talk about that shot is which is something that came up on the audio commentary from the writers, which is so funny. I didn't even thought about it when I saw it, which is when Keanu is going to the phone, there is the reflection of the fire on the phone, and it's the complete opposite side. It is so bizarre. Because he's going to the elevator is behind. The bus is burning behind him on the left, and then he goes to the elevator to the phone, and you see the fire almost just behind the. It's just so bizarre how. But it looked cool, right? You see the reflections. But
it looks cool. And that's all that matters.
The third thing I'm going to let you
sometimes.
say it because it's on your magazine. There is a crazy story that happened on this bus, isn't it? Jesus Christ. I could not believe when I read it on your magazine.
Well, this relates to the detonation of the actual explosion.
The hell?
Where a person... I mean, John Fraser was a special effects supervisor, but of course he has a whole team of pyro people and others involved. And then while they're getting ready to film the scene, obviously they try and be as safe as possible. And then someone, I think, tries to get on the bus or hail it, right, in downtown Venice Beach. And I think someone realized this was happening just in time. And if they hadn't, this person probably would have died.
What the hell?
Which I think is incredible.
That's such a crazy story. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I was just so basically this person is doing what Sandra Bullock does on the film, running after the bus.
Yes.
I'm assuming, did the person end up walking into the bus? Did she walk in? Actually,
I don't know.
So because she probably would have got in and saw a dummy and some dynamite. It's what the fuck is going on here? It is so crazy how close she was dying. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I think another super fun thing about this sequence is that scene is actually a big Texas switch. Now, Hugo, I don't know if you must know, but Texas switches are often used for stunt sequences where, say, a stunt performer jumps from a roof and they jump in front of a garden bed, and then out of the garden bed comes the actual actor, you know. So they've actually got two people there, as in the stunt performer doing the stunt and the actor, you know, ready to stand up once the stunt's occurred. But they do it without any edits and without any cuts. So that's called a Texas switch. Well, actually, they did that with this bus. And so you see the camera, you see the bus go past Keanu, and then you see the camera whip around Keanu in the car. Well, the first bus actually goes off to the left, out of frame, whereas the bus that's going to blow up is the one being towed and does blow up, all in one shot without any cut. And so I didn't know until very recently when I talked to John that was a big, big Texas switch, which I think is a really fun Texas switch, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely amazing. I had no idea. But when you start thinking about it, like, they had to, of course, because there was someone driving on the bus and it's a single shot. I'm a big fan of Texas switch. And, of course, you know, if anyone follows Todd Vasari's Twitter, he makes a huge record of Texas switches of a lot of things, but that's one of the things that he, basically that and split diopters as well. He does a lot of records of that on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know if he showed this one, actually. I need to check on Twitter if he's actually showed this one or if he's mentioned it. I'll ask him.
Yeah, so that first bus explosion is pretty great. Then, Hugo, I guess we get to one of the main special effects on the film, and we've talked about it a little bit already, which is you got many sequences on this main bus, the one central bus in the film. Sometimes the bus has to go around corners really fast. Sometimes you need to film underneath the bus. Obviously, you need to jump a bus. It's also part of the draw card of this film for me, is that you never think about it, but you never realize that more than however many buses there were, now I'm forgetting the number, but I think it's more than 6 or 7 actual buses
so
were used.
There's two numbers, so basically 12 is the number that they've mentioned on the featurette, and then 9 is the number that the producer mentions on the commentary. I believe the producer, because he might have known better. I think it's 9 buses, and so we have 9
incredible,
buses.
Isn't it? To think that John Fraser was allowed, to, and he had a fun story, I think, about sourcing some of these buses in the podcast that Chris Tapley does, but each bus performed a different thing. And was fitted out with a different way of blind driving or having cameras in the front. I just think, I'm not sure that films get made this way anymore. No. And that's really the main point I was going to make, which is, you need to film some buses around Los Angeles? Oh, yeah, we'll do 9 of them.
But it's
incredible.
But which is incredible about this is that the film is actually not that expensive anyway. So this just proves the point that these things are actually not that expensive. It's just that films are just not made this way anymore. They immediately this would have just been done as a CG sequence. And in fact, on Shang-Chi, we just mentioned there's a bus sequence on that film as well. And they have little sections with it. And then, of course, they have other sections. It's a big mix of things, including a lot of CG. But it's nothing like this, because they had the higher bus so that Keanu could be behind it, below it. They had the ones that they exploded with. They had a fast one, which was rigged to really, really haul ass to go as fast as possible. They had the one with the driver on top as well. They had the Pope Mobile version, which had this plexiglass square in front of it where they could put the crew and they could put the director. So this is really smart because it allowed them to shoot seamlessly on every single sequence. by having these cameras rigged with wires and rigged with cables, so they could actually also do handheld inside the bus as well. It's really effective. It's really cheap. It's much cheaper than actually being on the stage, I think. Obviously, it like you have to like close streets and you have to like close down entire sections of streets, but it is really smart. I find it fascinating. And they sourced the bus. We'll get to that, but they also sourced planes and everything for this bloody thing.
Yeah,
it is just insane.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, what I love about it is it's full of lots of gags. You know, like you've mentioned all the different buses. There was even a tip-over bus because they just wanted that right feeling of her going around the corner at the construction site. I remember also a favourite part of the film that I seriously remember. I can see this at the cinema as a 16-year-old. And it's the baby carriage, you know, that's full of cans. It's just cans. But an amazing way they filmed that, which is so convincing, is that they filmed it in 2 shots, right? There's a shot where the carriage is being pushed and the bus hits the carriage. So that's a shot. And then the second shot is that the carriage is actually attached to the front of the bus. And then an air cannon is used to shoot it out. And they actually use like an airbag air cannon, like to do it. And the way that's cut is like you wouldn't even realize, you know. And I guess, you know, we've already mentioned it, but a shout out to the way this film was edited. I sort of think it should have won the Academy Award for that work.
Yeah.
It's brilliantly done. But as I say, there's just so many nice gags in the film. In the same way that different visual effects shots are done in different techniques, I think so many buses mean there's different techniques to use as well, and you never feel like it's just the same thing.
Yeah, and it allowed this entire combination of having these 9 buses with different things. It really allowed also the acting to come through and the people on the bus, and also the chemistry between Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock as well, and. Because they were really there, you know, they had their hands on the bus, they were like there, they could hold the rails, they could move with the gravity and the shakiness and the braking, and they could react to the things around them, and also, of course, they had the lighting interaction because they were in real buses. There's really no way around it, and that's why the film becomes so visceral and becomes so realistic. Of course, this is a staple from this director, because he did the same thing with Twister as well, I think. He's really visceral. He's really realistic, and this is a 30-year-old film. You know, like it is quite old, and it really holds up. Like, I mean, it doesn't hold up on certain parts. There's a lot of plot holes in terms of story.
What? Are you serious?
There's a lot of plot holes and a lot of things that are just a bit stupid and a bit weird. But in terms of action sequences, it really holds up. And it's like a Bible for how they shot these films at the time. And it's like you've already mentioned this a few times on this podcast. It really influenced how films were made from that moment on. And I think its influence is still felt today, really, to be honest. The way the camera feels, the handheld feeling to it, the way it's staged and the different cuts and different angles, and even the multiple cameras running at the same time, which is a staple of a lot of directors, of course, but it's a much more common thing now because of digital, really, because it's a lot easier to stage now with digital than it was on film. So, yeah, and I wanted to mention the plot holes because I don't want it to be all positive, you know, like there is some negative things on this film. I don't want to upset you, so I'm not going to mention them.
Oh, well, we're going there. The biggest plot hole that doesn't make any sense, and I wish that they dealt with it, is the ridiculous subway sequence when he's not able to slow down or stop the train, but he's able to speed up.
Of course he is.
And then even if he is able to speed up, why do that?
I know.
Because he's trying to jump the tracks, but like what could be what's there that's safer than the end of the track.
But
he doesn't know.
The film is called Speed.
So he jumps the tracks anyway.
The film is called Speed.
Oh, man.
It has to be
See,
faster.
Yeah. I can't believe you've brought it up again, because now I'm gonna have nightmares about it. But it is such a dumb plot point. And it doesn't work.
I actually think the film, I'll be honest, I don't think the film necessarily needed the third act. I don't really think this train sequence, I kind of feel the film was over with the bus. I think that was it.
Yeah,
and that would have been the thing, which actually arcs back to the original idea from the writers, which you hear on the audio commentary, which Harry was supposed to be the bad guy on the film, which is a really crazy idea.
Would have been interesting.
It would have been really interesting. And so Dennis Hopper was just the first bomber, and then there was another person right after. And I think if it would have been a different film, of course, a completely different film. But I think the film stays too long. I think that I understand why they made it, but I think the subway sequence is a little bit too much already. Like, we already had the elevator, and then we had the bus, and then we had the train. I mean, pick two. Okay, you don't need to have three. You could just have two.
The subway thing seems like an add-on, and it does. And even when they feel like they're going to get out of it, it seems like an add-on. But the emotion of seeing Keanu and Sandra embrace and get together in very 90s film fashion makes it the best part of the whole, like, makes that third act the best bit, right? Like, it absolutely doesn't feel like a normal conventional film, because they've got off the bus and yet they're in danger again. Like, it just doesn't seem right. But then when they get together at the end, I think it works, and it's totally cool.
It's a bit cheesy. Why do they kill? I don't know, man.
Bit
they
cheesy.
Don't even know each other.
It's a 90s action film, Hugo.
They don't even know each other. Why are they kissing? Why are they having a relationship? They don't know. They don't even know each other.
Well, they've had an intense time.
There's another. So there are three things on this film. There's a lot of other. I'm gonna just mention three. So that's one. That acceleration of the thing. The second one is the kissing, which I think is just like preposterous, and why the hell is it even happening? But I think in my view, the thing that is more cringe on this film is actually at the very beginning. Why are they racing the car and jumping the car on the beginning, on the first shot when they introduce Henry? Why is the car jumping? Why are they running so fast and actually jumping the curb and then rotating the camera around Keanu Reeves chewing gum? What the fuck is that? What is going on this film? That sequence is not aged well, like, at all. Like, this is not aged. Why does he have gum? Why is the car jumping? Why is the camera rotating around him like a music video? Like, you're only missing Prodigy, I guess, and going around on the soundtrack, I guess, or something. It's so 90s. It's so 90s.
It is. But it does create a freneticism that matches what's going on with the elevator. The launch over that, and by the way, that area of LA, that street they're on, is really steep. So, like, it is like kind of real. But it is pretty funny. I'm pretty sure that Graham Yost in his commentary talks about spending a little bit of time with SWAT. LA police SWAT members.
He mentions that,
and basically realizing that they yell at each other a lot. Like when Lieutenant McMack goes, like, telling them what to do, and then he says "move," and things like that. Like, that's not just for effect. It's kind of like what they do. But that car jumping is pretty.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like Beverly Hills Cop, isn't it?
It's actually ridiculous.
Anyway.
No, I know, but I think the film. Okay, we're gonna get to the rest of VFX in a minute, but I need to be honest.
Sorry for this segue.
I mean, Ian, let's all be honest here. The film is not that good. Like, the film is okay. The film is not that good. If you really think about it, the film is amazing in terms of action, it's amazing in terms of visual effects, but it's completely preposterous. It's just like, It is out there the
Sure.
most preposterous thing I've seen in a long time, and I do you remember when we were we were together here in London, and we were sitting on a table with someone we were at this festival. We were at the 3D World Magazine Festival, the Vertex. We were at Vertex, and someone on the table, we were mentioning about speed, and someone much younger than us turned around and said, "Oh, you mean that kids movie?" Because the film didn't hold up well, man. I am sorry to tell you this. I'm so sorry to tell you this.
Wow, why have you waited an hour and a half into our podcast to say this, Hugo? This is shocking news. I might have to leave the room. I mean, of course it's preposterous and it's ridiculous, but that's the point. It's absolute escapism.
I know.
But it does have
I love
some human themes.
I love preposterous movies as well. Come on, I love
like
Escape from New York. Come on, it's the most preposterous film in the world. So
I don't think Speed's trying to say too much necessarily, but
I'm joking.
You do identify with those people on the bus,
Yeah.
and you do. The terrorism side maybe came in later,
Yeah.
in a weird way, like 9/11 stuff. But
Yeah.
the why I really love this film, just to get it out in the clear, is there another film like this?
No,
where you were absolutely entertained the entire film.
I think Twister,
Like-
which is another film from the same
Sure.
director, I feel like
Sure.
I know what you mean. This is a very special movie in terms of you not even noticing the time is going. Like
Yep.
you're watching the movie, the film is 2 hours long, and I watched it 3 times. I watched it with the 2 commentaries and in 4K. And just before we started recording, I had it on the background again when I was finishing my
Sure.
notes. And I was finishing my notes, and I had the trivia track on, so a trivia would pop in, and I would very often I would stop making notes and just kept watching the movie, and just be completely hypnotized by it, and just watching it, and then looking back at the clock and like, oh shit, it's been half an hour again. So you just get involved, and you just watch it.
And it's apparently one of those films that when it comes on Sky or a network, people just watch it. Exactly.
Yeah, it gets.
So,
it gets.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens here in the UK on Sky, when it doesn't play very often, but sometimes it does, it's trending on Twitter. It becomes actually trending.
And of course, it's got great lines like pop quiz, hot
my
shot,
God,
and
yeah. The whim of a madman. It's just
the whim of a madman. Yes, when asked, people like, why do you like Speed? People sort of go, oh, I don't really know, but then they realize some films don't entertain you the whole time. It's exposition. There's lulls in the plot. The only lull in this film is after they've killed Dennis Hopper the first time, and then they're kind of like in a bar celebrating. That's the only slow bit of the film.
Yeah.
But you need that to sort of show that they think they've won, And then after that, it's just basically, of course, it's a ride.
Yeah.
And that's why it works.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
We should get back to the visual
Yes,
effects.
let's do that.
The bus jump is fascinating, and I think it's fascinating for 2 reasons. One is the bus jump itself, and then there's this shot leading up to the bus jump, or a couple of shots, which at the time, as we keep saying in 1994, Hugo, were so hard to do. This is like a 329 frame shot filmed on a space cam helicopter gyro mount, and it's a zoom in following the bus in this freeway where there is no gap, but it's a digital gap that VFX, and Richard Hollander was the VFX soup at VFX on this, has painted into the freeway. So not only have they tracked a crazy panning, tilting, zooming camera shot from a helicopter full of vibrations for 300 plus frames, they've also added in like construction areas, space where the freeway actually was. They added in some CGI birds, which, classic thing to do in visual effects to give a shot life. I mean, it's almost one of the best invisible effect shots in any film I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You go.
It is, and it's. I can't emphasize enough how hard this is 30 years ago, because right now, yes, you probably can do it on your iPhone. Yes, I understand that. You can track really easily on any software. You can track on After Effects. You can track in Nuke. You can track on Fusion. Even your own iPhone can track rudimentary stuff already. So this is really not a thing at all these days. Like, not at all. Like, it's really simple stuff. But 30 years ago, Jesus, like, just taking into account that you barely had any compositing applications to work with, let alone you're scanning high-resolution plates, potentially in 2K or more, and then compositing this with whatever tool they didn't exist or didn't even have at the time, and then outputting it into film again, and then it's seamless. You look at it, and man, they even had the time to put some birds. It's just insane how good it is, because it is they've even put these little birds flying, which look really realistic, and they just distract even more. It is just so good.
There's actually an issue of Befores and Afters print magazine where I talk about those birds and sort of the particle effects and other simulations that were being done at the time, called Boyd's, was how that was done. But I really love that beginning of the bus jump. There's even a shot looking through the windshield. Yeah. So that's an even harder kind of thing to track and make happen.
Shaking a lot.
Yeah. So Hugo, that's the leading up to the bus jump sequence, that gap in the freeway stuff by VFX. So good. What I then love is the methodology for the actual bus jump, which is incredible, almost insane, that they would actually jump a real bus over a ramp, and then they would use, again, what are really new techniques in terms of matte painting, digital compositing, and some modeling to manufacture a gap. But let's talk about the actual jump itself. I kind of love the stunt driver the most, who did that jump, right? He's super cool. I think he bit his tongue. Like, I felt really sorry for him in the jump itself. But it's super cool how they put him in like this bungee cord thing in the center of the bus, right?
so he didn't hurt his back. He wouldn't compress his spine. It was really smart, and actually it turns out it was invented for this specific shot, that kind of methodology of having, which is so smart, because then you kind of get the weightlessness of the jump, and then when he basically is disattached from the bus itself. The funny thing about all of this is that they had like 9 cameras filming, all film again, I keep emphasizing this, it's film cameras, not digital, film cameras, 9 cameras pointing at this thing. 20 feet in the air, 190 feet jump, which is insane. And the funny thing is, John de Bont didn't like it. He was like really upset. Like, he was so upset when he finished the show.
Because it was 100 feet long ramp, 8 feet high, and John Fraser, the special effects soup, had put a 16 feet or inch, it must be feet, kicker. And that made the bus do this sort of movement with its, it kind of made it look like it's soaring rather than a parabolic move, right? Which is what would happen. Yeah. And I think in the end it created a much better shot. But at the time, the director was like, this is not what I want.
He couldn't do anything about it. He only had one. Because the bus completely disintegrated in landing. It broke completely. Like the front wheel axis broke. It kind of just went into the ravine. Like, it just went all berserk. It broke completely.
Oh my God.
I know why. I understand why he didn't like it, because it looks so weird. It's now legendary, that shot, of course. But if you think about it, it is preposterous that the bus is going up like a motorcycle. It is absolutely preposterous. It makes no fucking sense, because the reality of it, because the gap, both sides are on the same height. So the bus would just drop. It wouldn't jump. It would just like drop in the floor. And
it's a movie, Hugo. It's a movie. Come on.
If I had the money, I would hire a bunch of CG artists, and I would comp it myself, and I would fix this shot, the real version of what should have happened, which is the bus should have went over, and then the top of the bus would have been broken by hitting the other side of the tarmac. Everyone would die, the bus would drop, explode, and then the credits would roll. If I ever have the money or the capability, I will do this shot, you know.
Didn't Mythbusters film a bus jump at some point?
I didn't saw that episode. I didn't know that.
One of their episodes.
I didn't saw that.
Yeah.
Okay. What happened?
Sure.
Did it work?
I don't know. And who cares? It's a movie, Hugo. So.
But hey, John DeVod was pissed about it. It's like he was like shaking his hand, like really pissed. Everyone was so happy, like, they did it.
Yeah. What's fun though is that it happens, a bit in slow motion, and you get a lot of time to see the girders and the gap itself. And I actually think ImageWorks did a stellar job on that, with just, again, as you say, taking VistaVision plate, pretending it's anamorphic, being able to do a slight move on it, and just really very convincing matte painting and compositing work.
The matte painting is extraordinary. It's extraordinary, and we're
even a shadow of the bus,
and the little highlights of the metal bars of the girder and the connection. Man, this is like at this time, Photoshop would have been like a really bare bones application. I mean, and I don't know if they use Photoshop, probably not, but I mean, like, image processing and matte painting was really rudimentary. So to pull this off, like, I was blown away by how good it looks still, it's, and then they added like all the dust and the particles and the sparks when it hits the floor. It's just so convincing. Especially I'm not so much fond of that top shot, like the one that goes up like a motorcycle, but the one landing is absolutely stunning. The landing shot is what I mean. So good. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and you just assume that's all real. Like, you really do. Yeah. You really, really assume it is, and that's how convincing it is. You mentioned like some of the documentaries. It's almost been one of the only places to see some of ImageWorks' befores and afters in play, right? So make sure people check out that documentary, the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, on the DVD, on the original DVD.
Yeah, it's fun to see ImageWorks.
It's on YouTube as well.
Showcased.
People can find it. Like, some people have uploaded to YouTube. I'm not condemning or criticizing that, but a lot of people have uploaded those extras to YouTube. Especially, I don't really have a problem with that at this stage, because after the fact that they've removed it from the Blu-ray, it is a bit sad that it's been removed from the HD version, the Blu-ray, the 4K Ultra HD. And this is like this DVD is from 2003. So it's now been like it's now 2004. Sorry, 2004. So it's like been a long time since it's been like 20 years since the DVD came out. So, of course it's going to be on YouTube. So people can find it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that Ron Brinkmann sent me in his little package were like tons and tons of great photo references, but like just, like developed photographs of ramps and on-ramps and freeways and construction sites that ImageWorks, or he probably went out and took around Los Angeles, for absolute direct reference to build girders and do that work. And I just think that's super cool, because of course now we just walk around with our iPhone or a DSLR and do it. But now they had to go out and shoot reference, get it developed, and have it just there. I'm not even sure if they would scan that in as reference. I guess they would.
Yeah, probably.
But it's really fun to have all these like construction site photos of LA in my little package.
Are you doing another book about this then? Are you going to do another magazine? Come on, you have now material to do 3 magazines about speed. Where is the speed book? Come on, Ian. Where is it? Where is it?
Well, there is nothing like Chris Tapley's. I know I keep mentioning it.
The podcast.
There is nothing like that podcast. Yeah. And in some ways, it's very smart he did a podcast because you get individual people to say lots of things rather than, trying to condense it down into quotes, written quotes. And so this oral history of speed is one of the coolest things that I really have seen.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm excited that I did this magazine, but yes, there's so much to talk about with speed. I guess it's fun to have that oral history, and then the visual effects stuff is.
I really hope it doesn't disappear one day, because that's the bummer about digital really right now is that podcast could disappear. If the podcast service goes down, or God forbid, of course, if he dies or if he doesn't pay the service anymore or something like that, because we don't really talk much about that, but there is really no...
What about our podcast, Hugo? Don't you dare go and die or not pay the fee.
It's the same thing. What I mean is I don't know if people realize this, but, if someone doesn't log in on YouTube for like a year, they switch off the account. And so... they do. And you can put like extra people that would take over the account if you can actually put that on Google. Google is an example of that. But I don't think a lot of people talk about this. And it's funny that you're mentioning this as the podcast as a record, because there is really no plan about digital. And in fact, YouTube and Facebook, on Twitter, articles, magazines, digital magazines, podcasts, all these things really depend on how much people are still paying for the fee that they are paying for the podcast to be up. So it depends on how much you're paying. All these assets could be depending on a subscription to Dropbox or a subscription to Google Drive or a subscription to YouTube Prime, or any of those things. If they stop being paid, they just get disconnected or disabled or deleted. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this, the fact that we could be in a dangerous, precarious situation where things could just be lost because no one is really thinking about that. I feel like that is something that we should all start thinking about the way of moving accounts to the people, or maybe even moving it to another generation. Because, in 50 years from now or 40 years from now, like you just said, when we die, is our podcast lost forever? No one will ever see it? This is... Because, before, you just have the DVD or you have the Blu-ray or you have something like that. But now you don't really have that anymore. So I just mention that because that is a terrific record. But unless it's archived somewhere, it could disappear. So I hope someone is archiving it, and I hope someone does that. Or if it officially gets archived. And I guess what I'm leading up to is I feel like we are missing, institutions that would archive these things. We're kind of missing that. The same way we have libraries, and we have, libraries both archive films and books and things like that. But we are kind of in the precipice of having problems with archiving podcasts and archiving those kind of records. This is a common problem with the games industry, for example, because the games industry has been going on for since the 60s, really 70s. And there's been hundreds and hundreds of podcasts that interviewed first account source from people that have now died, that created the first video games. And they've now died. And so those podcasts are the only record of the interview of these people. And so if that podcast is lost, we lose that interview forever. You know what I mean? This is something that we all should start thinking about in a more serious way. I didn't mean to bring down the podcast really suddenly. But you reminded me, because this podcast that you mentioned about speed is outstanding. It's an outstanding record of everyone involved in this film.
Yeah, a quick side note on that is related to also archiving films. And it turns out, of course, that 35mm film has become one of the best ways to properly archive film. Like, it's hilarious in a way. Like, because it just stands the test of time if stored properly and all that sort of thing. And all these digital methods, of course, if you have multiple redundancies, it's the right solution. But at some point, you can't read the tape drive. At some point, you can't read the zip drive. At some point, you can't read EXRs, you know. So
the file becomes obsolete, or the file becomes...
issue.
It is definitely an issue. And I feel like... I feel like this is something that should be talked more about it, you know.
People are on it. I would say people are on it.
I hope so.
They're just on it for specific things, like film archiving. They're not necessarily on it on the things you're talking about, which is Ian doing enough to archive the Befores and Afters podcast?
For example.
Is Hugo doing enough to archive VFX Notes? You know, I'm not, you know. So, yeah.
I know what you mean.
Okay.
I know exactly what you mean. Or your magazine. Like, your magazine is self-published. So that means that once you're gone, like, it won't be published anymore, because your account becomes disconnected on Amazon, you know. So all these things are kind of like quite... We are really on a situation in the world where we've never had so much content. Of course, this becomes an issue as well. But I think it is a bigger issue because some of this content is actually first record statements of things that you can't really recover. Some of these people have died, and some of these people are not going to be interviewed anymore, you know. Like I'm not saying that the people died on your magazine, but I mean, like, sooner or later, some of the people that you've interviewed are quite old, and they will die, and then the record of your podcast will be probably the only record of what they've talked about that specific thing, you know.
I would say the VES and SIGGRAPH are definitely looking into this right now, and it's a bit of a thing. And, you know, one of the things that comes up a lot, Hugo, is... okay, we want to do all this stuff, but who's going to pay for it?
Exactly.
And is there enough interest in looking at it? You know, as in, is the payoff there? And people are looking at it, but I get your point totally. And gosh, I mean, it was easier when it was all print.
Exactly.
Wasn't it? It was. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going with some of the big sequences. The next big one is, of course, when the bus finally crashes at LAX, which, of course, is not LAX. It's somewhere else. And crashes into this plane. I remember as like a 17-year-old or 18-year-old Hugo, is one of the factoids released about this sequence was that production had bought a plane and painted it. I mean, how cool is that? I know we heard those stories about Chris Nolan doing it for Tenet, but Speed was the OG.
Oh,
right?
yeah. $80K, man. They spent $80,000 on this thing, which is not a lot. It's a lot of money to blow up a plane. It is quite insane that they did that. And we have the return of our favorite actor on the film, which is The Wire, pulling the bus again. They should have on the credits, like, starting The Wire, and it's pulling again the bus. There's a lot of... It's really funny, this sequence. There's a lot of Easter eggs. You have the producer running around, coming out of the bus, like he's like running around, becoming one of the extras.
He's in the car, in the tow car for the plane.
On the tow car of the plane. Then you have, of course, the logos and the names, which are an Easter egg for Die Hard, for the Pacific Courier as well. And man, this is a massive it's a beautiful explosion, isn't it? It's like a massive explosion.
Oh my gosh.
It is massive.
Yes.
Again,
gasoline.
Bigger than Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
So if anyone's like, they should have hired that team to do the Oppenheimer explosion. Jesus, it's gigantic, this explosion.
Here's what John Frazier said to me. We used the dirtiest, oldest gasoline we could find, the most volatile. When you use new gasoline out of the pump, it didn't give that look. We saved that gasoline in barrels for a couple of months just to try and age it. So it's aged gasoline. I love it. It's probably not very healthy.
No.
Yeah. Hugo, an interesting thing about this airport and this scene, I've mentioned it's not LAX, it's Mojave Airport. There are mountains in the background, I think. And anyone who's from LA would realize it's not Los Angeles. But just like not deleting the cables that tow buses or tow other things in this show, in this film, we don't care, do we? We're so into the film, we don't care that ImageWorks didn't get rid of it at the time, which I'm not sure they could have. But certainly it wasn't budgeted for.
It would have been easy. It wouldn't have been easy as well to do that. It would have been. It's not like you can really use. It's not like you have Nuke and a clean plate to kind of like paint this over. I mean, these days you can probably even use the Photoshop AI tool to paint that out, so it would be even faster. But I just find it fascinating, and shout out to the determination that they had to get the airplane to lift. Like at the beginning of that sequence when the bus comes in, the sheer determination and will they had to be weeks trying to shoot where the bus would come in and an airplane would fly exactly on that moment. That is an amazing shot on the beginning of this entire sequence where you have a jumbo jet kind of like flying through, synchronized with the bus. They spent weeks to shoot this thing, and it's just like to try to grab that in. You just don't do this anymore because you would have just done a CG plane flying over. But no, this again, we've mentioned this before. I think this is the end of the film. Really, I think the film should have ended here. I wouldn't be sad if the credits would roll there because that is the payoff. Like it explodes. They catch the the bad guy is on the wind. I guess he probably could have, maybe that's for Speed 2. They could have finished the film there. It is a fantastic sequence, and actually I think the first time I saw it, I thought that was it. I thought it was going to be over there,
Yeah. No, I'm so glad it continues, but I know what you mean.
Because you just want Speed to continue forever. But I guess do you like Speed 2? Probably not, right? Do you like Speed 2?
I'm just pretending I didn't hear the question. Speed 2.
I'm sorry, I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you again.
Speed 2 is probably one of the worst movies ever made.
But you like it, right?
No, I don't like Speed 2. I was obsessed with it, as in, oh my God, they're making another one. Oh, that's a bummer Keanu's not in it. But I was obsessed with the trailer. It has a really good trailer. And this is like 1997.
I remember that. The trailer was very good. I remember that.
You could watch it on the internet. Yeah. The film came out and I was like, oh, this is awful. And then I was kind of excited at the time because I just started university and had just discovered Cinefex. And then discovered other visual effects information around. Rhythm and Hughes had such a cool little site dedicated to their work on Speed 2. And so did Todd Vasari with VFX HQ, had something there as well. And then the official Speed website had something about the visual effects work. So actually, as a visual effects person, I was super steamed up about Speed 2. I also thought ILM did a really good job on some of the sequences that they had to deal with, like the cruise liner. I think they even developed some ambient occlusion tech for that back then.
I remember that.
So, as a thing for Speed 2, visual effects thing, cool. Worst film ever. And again, go to Chris Tapley's podcast for a really interesting discussion about how they basically knew they were making a crap film, but they just had all basically said yes, and they needed to finish it.
It's so funny, the audio commentary with the producers on the first film. They really have no boundaries. They're just like full on, like they just say everything. It is so they're unhinged. And there's a part of the commentary. There's like he's one of the, I don't remember which one. He's one of those like saying, Yeah, and then they went and did Speed 2. We were not involved. We just keep saying to everyone, we were not involved on Speed 2.
It had nothing to do with Speed 2.
And then he just turn around and just say, and you see how that went, that was really bad, wasn't it? It was like they were so bitter about it. They were so fucking bitter about the film not being involved at all.
Love it.
No.
Okay, I want to mention one quick note about the big plane explosion that I love John Fraser shared with me again. He said, Jan, they'd been filming some other stuff related to that sequence, and then Jan said, okay, let's blow the bus up. How long will it take you to fill the plane with gasoline and explosions? And John says, it's been filled with gasoline all day. The whole day they were filming, and apparently Jan de Bont turned white. So I just think, there was a different way of making films back in the 90s, wasn't there? It really was.
It's the 90s. I'm assuming they were even smoking around the plane. They were even having cigarettes and probably just not even caring. It's gasoline. They're probably putting the barrels of gasoline with a cigarette on their mouth or something. It is insane how much. This kind of reminds me of early Formula One, Formula One from the 80s on the 90s. It is so dangerous, and everyone was dying all the time, and they're just so blasé about it. It's just that's how it was. That was it. It's so dangerous. At any moment, a lot of people could have died on this film. It is, and nothing happened. Not a lot of there was a few accidents. I know. I know some actors got a bit, bounced around and everything, but it wasn't any. There wasn't any major accident. That's what I mean.
Yeah. So that's a crazy sequence, and then we go into Hugo, the subway sequence. We've talked about it already a little bit, but the combination here of real photography, compositing in miniatures, and adding lights and extra things, I had forgotten how seamless that work is. But as an overall thing, although Grant McKeown Design had done the elevator miniature, here was Jack Sessome's engineering doing the train miniatures. They were known for that kind of work, and they've done brilliant stuff over the years when they were still operational. It's probably the combination of miniatures and, as we talked about before, some really, really, really high attention to detail cinematography, miniature cinematography that makes this scene work, right? And that's thanks to Jan de Bont, but also visual effects DOP, David Jezrecki, who's still around doing incredible work, but was responsible for shooting these miniature trains. I just could look at this stuff all day, and in fact, that's what made the cover.
Yeah. You have some incredible photos on the magazine.
Yeah, and David shared all those with me for this issue, so I really have him to thank for making
they're
that possible.
fantastic. I don't think I've ever seen them before. This is just incredible. I guess it's his personal photos, isn't it, that he has on the magazine?
Yeah, and then there's David and Jan de Bont, for example, collaborating on set. So I'm not sure how much to say about this, Hugo, except that I really love the combination, as I say, of, okay, we've got to get some trains, to crash, and so they've been rigged to crash and, go through this industrial construction site. But also we need kind of full shots, as in full screen shots of the train starting to go awry along the train track. And I was pleasantly surprised that some of those live action plates, miniature train photography, and then extra elements of lights shot, motion control, and then all composited by ImageWorks. And those, to me, are the most convincing visual effects shots in the film. Ron Brinkmann talks a lot about those in the magazine and in other stories. Just some of the great invisible effects work that you wouldn't even realize was in the film.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why it works so well is because the base of it is so good, because they this entire model, which is done on 1/8 of a scale, and we already mentioned photographed with a really great calculation of frame rates to try to get it to work really well, to try to compensate, and also the f-stops. But I think because they've constructed this entire set like if they would have done it for real, and they've staged it like if it was for real, like if it would have been done 1-to-1, that's why it's so convincing. Because then when it happens, when the train collapses and goes against the brick and it goes against the pillar, you kind of like believe it, because it's 1/8 is quite big, and these trains that they've built actually had quite powerful motors in them, and they had a lot of weight to them. So I think the weight is really what sells this, because it's not like styrofoam. It's not like the first explosion on the movie. You know, when Keanu Reeves goes off the door, that explosion is quite fake, because you can really tell the pieces of the debris and the pieces of the stone that comes out of the door. You can see that it's like styrofoam painted. You know, you can kill it because they bounce and they drop, and they're quite bouncy, and they kind of fly quite, and so there's no weight to it. But this is like really hefty trains. These trains with the engines, and they're made of aluminium. They're really heavy, and I think that's why
they reflect.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing. They feel like they're part of the frame. Yeah. They reflect lighting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think things were done on the stages to aid in that, like even reflecting water off them.
Exactly.
And actually, the anamorphic lens flares is really also a big part of implementing them, integrating them into the frames. I just think the shots of the train freewheeling and like the workers running away from it, they're the most convincing. The shots that are fun, but to me still feel a bit like miniatures, is when it's slow. The train is like has broken in half and then is going up to Hollywood Boulevard. I don't care. I'm in the moment. I really love it, but that's the most miniature.
Yeah, if you would have seen the
shot,
if you would have seen these shots separately, you would have thought more about the miniature. I think because you see it in sequence, you don't really think much about it. And it's really smart because they begin the shot with actual people in the tunnel. And so you see the people there and like screaming and saying, oh, and then running away. And that's the only moment where you see people. And I think that really sells the shot, because you see the train coming, you see the people, and like, oh shit. And then of course you don't see any more people until the end, until they are in Boulevard. But it doesn't matter, because the illusion has been sold, like that there were people there and it was dangerous, and of course they ran away, and that's why they're not there. So it's really smart. Like, it's really, really smart.
Yeah, the illusion. Yeah. You're dead right. There's one particular shot I just am in love with. It's like the camera gets a chance to focus in on the wheels spinning, and there's some sparks, and then zooms off. And I've probably talked to the guys about it, and Ron Brinkmann, and I still don't really know how that shot was done. It's very effective.
Yeah.
So
it's really good. Yeah.
Okay, it hits that barrier to go up onto what seems to be a pretend new subway development on Hollywood Boulevard. It launches out of there, which is itself a visual effects shot, as in it's a comp of a real train carriage, but it's actually a bus made out to be a train carriage. So there's a little bit of compositing and fixing up of things there. And then it lands. I guess I'm pointing out things I always think are funny, but I've noticed every time I watch the film, it slides along Hollywood Boulevard for a while, Hugo, and you can see the spark generator. Like, if you look really closely, you can see it's not actually touching the ground, but there's sparks generated to make it look like it is. I love it. But of course, it just, today we wouldn't do that. We'd generate them probably in Houdini, or we'd fix up the spark generator. But there we go. Whoa. Big film, big visual effects.
You skipped his head, decapitation.
Oh my god, I skipped the head.
I'm going to just leave it to the last minute, because it is the best, isn't it? It is absolutely the best. Like
that fight is super cool though, isn't it? On top of the train, which was filmed rear projection, Keanu and Dennis Hopper. No one realized that was shot rear projection for years and years.
I don't know if they mentioned this. I think it was on your magazine. Wouldn't have this been one of the last times that they would have used these kind of techniques, wasn't it? So
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because it's just at the brink of we started using green screen and blue screen all the time. So I would have assumed. I mean, I know in '99. Rear projection was used quite a lot on Eyes Wide Shut from Kubrick, but I think he used it there. But I'm talking about an action movie. I'm not talking about Kubrick is Kubrick and he's probably just used it because it's the only thing he knew.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of rear projection. It's kind of a different kind of thing with Tom Cruise. But I think for an action movie, I don't really, because when you look at Twister, there's no rear projection anymore on Twister. It's only a couple of years later. So I think it's one of the
a strange transition time where James Cameron still used it on Terminator 2, and then there was another company in Los Angeles called Intravision, which had their proprietary front projection tech, and the truth is digital compositing and blue screen and green screen
just over.
Made that.
Yeah, it took over.
But they were doing great things like on The Fugitive and a few other films right before Speed.
Yeah.
So, yes, it probably was one of the last times. Why this works is that there's a particular kind of light inside a tunnel, where they have gone and been able to shoot background plates, process plates for this. There's a particular kind of light you can get from reflecting off the surface of the top of a train. You're always close in with Keanu and Dennis, so the depth of field works. It just works. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how else they would have done it apart from blue screen.
It's really, really well made. It really, really looks like they're actually there.
Yeah.
Like it's really well captured. It's like you said, it's one of the last films that have these kind of techniques. They still work. It's funny to think about that this film is 94. We're just a couple of years away from The Matrix, which is 99, which would have been shot in 97, 98. It is quite insane how quick it went from the rear projection to full blue screen, green screen in just 4 or 5 years. It is really intense development happening on that sense.
Yeah. Well, part of it must have been a little bit about delaying decisions, right? Like and we're running into the same issue now with LED walls, which is if you're trying to get an in-camera final pixel shot, you've got to do all the work up front, and you've got to optimize your assets if you're trying to do moving cameras, to enable them to be game engine assets, basically, for parallax movement. So all the work has to happen up front, and it has to be good.
Exactly.
So that if you're aiming to be final pixel.
Exactly.
With rear projection, you have to do a lot of work up front. You have to shoot the plates.
Yeah, and they did this VistaVision camera rigging on the trains. And
but my point is, with blue screen, you can delay your decision and choices until after you've shot the blue screen plates. And I think that's probably one reason why that kind of filmmaking was favored for a while.
But it took a long time for the blue screen to not look like blue screen. That's the problem we have. And that's, I think, I don't want to go back to this conversation. I'll be really brief, but that is one of the reasons why the no CGI thing is happening, because 2000 to 2010 is really the pivotal moment where visual effects was just not there just yet. The blue screens were a bit off. The green screens were a bit off. You could still see a bit of the spill. You could still see a bit of the edges. It was just not perfect enough. And then, of course, now it's seamless, and people don't even know what they're talking about. But they will always refer to the CG that was done at this time in place, where the technology of compositing was not advanced enough to make it look as seamless as this rear projection system that was really well made. So, because also we have examples of really bad rear projection happening at the same time, but this is really well made rear projection. That's why it works so well, So
and then Hugo, obviously, the head coming off, he lost his head. is a dummy of Dennis Hopper. There's some great behind the scenes photos of the dummy at Chris Tapley's podcast, by the way. It's a quick shot. Of course it's a dummy, and of course there's probably a tiny bit of fixing of compositing there, but it's super convincing, right? Yeah. Like startling almost.
It is really good.
I think it works.
It's really good. And then the sound as well. The sound design is great. You hear the you hear the sound, the bell, which is really fantastic.
Yeah.
I think I read on your magazine that he was a bit unhappy that there wasn't enough blood or more blood on it. But I think if he had more blood, probably the film wouldn't have been the PG-13 film that it was, at least in Portugal. I know in the UK it's 15, but in Portugal it's PG-14. It wouldn't have been so accepted. But it's an outstanding shot. It is, and it's also really funny because we spend this entire film with this bad guy. Dennis Hopper, by the way, steals the show. He's amazing on the film. He's so cool.
How good
he's having so much fun, isn't he? You can clearly see that he's having so much fun. He's like really enjoying himself. This legendary actor that has done everything, and then just having so much fun on set doing this silly character. And all of this goes through. He has a bomb on the elevator, and then a bomb on the bus, and then he has a bomb rigged on him. All of this. And you're waiting for some kind of climax or some kind of like final thing that will happen. And it's just so quick. He just goes off and that's it. He's dead. Like, it's just so quick and so out of the blue and unexpected. And it's funny as well. It becomes really funny. And then the funny thing is that that is actually something really well constructed on the film from the director. He becomes not the menace of the film. Then the menace is actually the train that is going really fast, and that becomes the villain of the film. Then because they almost died because of that, and not because of him. He's almost like harmless.
You could argue that the plot becomes the villain of the film, since they don't really solve that in a very good way with speeding it up.
It is called Speed.
I know.
I keep saying it is called Speed.
Wow. Hugo, we've reached an end of this discussion about the visual effects.
I know.
In an epic episode.
It's an epic. It is by far it is not our longest. I think Avatar 2 is the longest episode we've ever done. But it is there. It's up there. But it had to be, right? It's your favorite film. It is a massive film. It's also the 30-year anniversary of the film and the 3rd year anniversary of our podcast as well. So we had to have something special. It had to be something special.
We did.
To celebrate both these iconic, legendary things, Speed and the VFX Notes Podcast.
And not Speed 2. Well, thank you, Hugo, for deciding that we should do an episode on our favorite film, because it's clearly your favorite film as well. But thanks everyone for watching and listening to this extremely long episode. But we hope we gave you some fun factoids and encourage you to watch the film for the 30th anniversary. And
there's so much more, man. Guys, go and listen to the audio commentary, go and read the magazine, and go and watch the podcast. There is so many more stories around this film. This film is filled with trivia and things and like really funny factoids all over the place, you know.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Hugo. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now. One final person will just say a quick goodbye. See ya.